that we work so hard to do. But it's just a certain division that needs to be brought to everyone's attention and understanding that, no, this is something that's been going on. And it's just getting to a point where it's like, all right, now enough is enough. I think there's
enough is enough, man. Enough is enough, man. Yeah. Yeah, enough is enough.
a larger conversation that needs to be had that is really above us. And I think that is the part that we really need to get to. So hopefully at All-Star, we can have an opportunity and a conversation because at this time, we something needs to change.
At All-Star, they want to have an opportunity and a conversation. That's what I was alluding to in the beginning. They're going to walk into Caitlyn Clark's room.
We can sit back and we can watch what's happening to Caitlyn Clark. And they know how they're treating her, why they're treating her that way.
She became a roadshow. And I don't know that, and I don't want to slight anybody in college, but I don't remember seeing that in my time. And that's held true. We've wanted a player or a league that can, sort of transcend some of these spaces and have a roadshow. The NBA has had their players that people come to see, right? So when the Wolves sell tickets, there are certain games that they know people are going to come watch certain players. And, Caitlyn Clark and some of the other rookies give us that. Obviously, Caitlyn, being the headliner.
45 points, 10 assists, under 30 minutes on the floor, and not a single veteran in that league saw it coming at the scale it actually arrived. Here's what nobody is saying out loud, but everybody is clearly thinking right now. A 22-year-old rookie just walked into the WNBA, rewrote the record books in real time, and somehow made a group of decorated, championship-winning veterans so uncomfortable that they reportedly started organizing meetings before the All-Star game even tipped off. And now the coach running one of those All-Star squads is reportedly handing Caitlyn Clark the captain armband, the one that's always gone to the multi-time MVP, the league elder, the player who built the room before Clark ever stepped inside it. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Clark deserves that captain role, or does A'ja Wilson have every right to be frustrated? Because this conversation is about to get a whole lot more interesting than a simple yes or no. We are breaking down every layer of this: the record, the captain decision, the players meeting, what Adam Silver actually said, and what is very likely coming in Chicago this weekend. Stay with us.
They're gonna knock on the door. Caitlyn Clark's gonna open the door to her hotel room. She's gonna peek through it, and there's gonna be that, that sliding thing on the door, and all there's gonna be is like the chain. And she's gonna peek through and say, "Oh shit!" She's gonna try to close the door, and then all the players at one time, Brittany Griner, A'ja Wilson, they're all gonna just, let me. They're gonna bum rush her. They're gonna bum rush into that room, and they're gonna tie Caitlyn Clark up to a chair. They're gonna tell Caitlyn Clark, "You're not leaving this room until you come out and you denounce those pesky fans of yours."
Let's start with the performance itself, because without understanding what actually happened against Seattle, none of the drama that followed makes any real sense. Caitlyn Clark stepped onto that floor against the Seattle Storm and proceeded to put together a stat line that this league has genuinely never seen before in nearly 30 years of existence. 45 points, 10 assists. And here is the part people keep glossing over when they throw those numbers around casually. She did all of it in under 30 minutes of floor time. This wasn't a situation where a player got hot in garbage time and padded her numbers against a second-string defense. Seattle knew exactly what Clark was capable of walking into that game. They spent the majority of the night doubling her, throwing an extra body at her every single time she caught the ball, and still couldn't find a way to slow it down. That's not a coaching failure on Seattle's part. That's what happens when a player is genuinely operating on a different level than the defensive scheme being thrown at her. The record itself deserves its own moment here, because it carries real weight. Clark became the first player in WNBA history, not the first guard, not the first Indiana Fever player, the first player of any kind across any team in any era, to post a 40-point, 10-assist performance in a single game. That's a category that didn't exist before she created it on that specific night. And what makes the performance even harder to dismiss is what was happening around her at the same time. Kelsey Mitchell dropped 30 points of her own in that same game. The two of them combined for 75 of Indiana's 110 total points. This wasn't Clark carrying a struggling team on her back, while everyone else stood around watching. Her teammates had genuinely strong nights too, and Clark was still the most dominant player on that floor by a significant margin. That's the kind of output that doesn't just make highlight reels. It shifts conversations. It changes how coaches think about their rosters. It makes certain decisions, like who gets handed a captain's armband before an all-star game, feel less like political moves and more like straight arithmetic. But the performance on the court was only the beginning of what this week was actually going to turn into. Because while Clark was busy rewriting the record books in Seattle, something else was already being set up hundreds of miles away.
It's just cute. Like, I don't know if she's ever like maybe surprised by what she does, but like even that three, I think she was like almost probably a little surprised that it went in. It was just one of those plays where it's like, dang, like it's one of those nights where you're really feeling it, you're really in the zone, and to finish through contact, that was pretty fun. And I actually had probably the best view of it because I was kind of trailing right behind her, so it was pretty cool, and obviously got the crowd into it too.
Cheryl Reeve is coaching one of the 2 all-star squads heading into Chicago this weekend. And according to multiple reports, she has been leaning toward handing Caitlyn Clark the captain duties for her team days before the game even tips off. On the surface, that might not sound like the kind of decision that generates real friction. Coaches hand out captain roles all the time. It's an exhibition game. It's supposed to be a celebration. But drop that decision into this particular moment in this particular league, and it lands like a match thrown directly into something that was already completely soaked. The reason is simple. That captain role has a history attached to it. It's the kind of designation that traditionally goes to the vocal leader, the multi-time MVP, the player who has held that armband in rooms like this before without anyone raising an eyebrow. A'ja Wilson checks every single one of those boxes. 3 championships, 4 MVP awards, a resume that speaks for itself before she ever opens her mouth. And Reeve is reportedly skipping past all of that to hand the role to a player in her second WNBA season. The reported reasoning isn't hard to follow, though. Clark is the one filling arenas this season. She's the one moving television ratings to numbers the league hasn't seen in years. She's the one whose jersey sales are breaking records off the court the same way her box scores are breaking them on it. And Reeve is coaching an exhibition game built specifically to showcase the league's 30th season to the largest possible audience. The captain decision, framed that way, starts looking less like a snub and more like a broadcast strategy. This year's All-Star setup already had more cameras and more visibility baked into it than usual. Led in Cynthia Cooper and Teresa, Witherspoon served as honorary general managers and drafted the rosters live on ESPN, turning the whole selection process into its own broadcast event before the game even happened. So every single decision this weekend, captains included, is playing out under a level of scrutiny that a normal all-star game simply doesn't generate. There is no quiet way to hand Clark that armband over Wilson in this environment. Every person watching is going to see it happen in real time. And the reaction was going to be immediate, loud, and completely divided. The only question was what was already simmering before this decision even entered the picture. And that answer was already waiting. Before the captain report ever surfaced, there was already a meeting being organized. A'ja Wilson reportedly said she needed to sit down with the players. That statement came out quietly at first, but multiple outlets quickly connected the dots and pointed out that the comment was specifically aimed at the situation surrounding Caitlyn Clark. Not in a vague, general way. In the specific, targeted way that you get when frustration has been building for long enough that it stops being something a player wants to handle privately. The stated reason circling around that meeting request was referee treatment. Clark had been involved in a string of altercations with officials that had fans and media arguing for weeks about who actually gets the benefit of the doubt on the court and who doesn't. And here's where the irony started making the rounds online in a way that was genuinely difficult to ignore. Wilson has had her own documented run-ins with officials. Clips of her getting vocal with referees, challenging calls, and expressing frustration courtside have circulated plenty of times over the years. Those moments largely passed through the media cycle without much extended commentary. Clark having a visible reaction to a referee call turned into a national news story with multiple think pieces written about it within 48 hours. Fans noticed that contrast, and they were not quiet about pointing it out. But the meeting request didn't appear in isolation either. There's a longer history behind Wilson's public comments about Clark that gives this week's news a different kind of weight when you lay it all out together. Back in December, Wilson sat down with Time magazine and said plainly that the hype surrounding Clark's rise had erased WNBA history for a minute. She added that she didn't like that. She was careful to frame it as not a personal shot at Clark. Her actual issue, she said, was with fans treating the league like it started the moment Clark arrived, overlooking the players who spent years building it into something worth arriving to. That's a legitimate point. Wilson has earned every right to speak on the league's history. 3 championships and 4 MVP awards give a player that standing. But she kept coming back to it. Every media cycle that centered on Clark seemed to pull Wilson back into that same conversation, whether it was a magazine profile, an award nomination, or a press availability after a game. The pattern was becoming harder and harder to frame as coincidental. And now, layered on top of that ongoing pattern, came a captain decision that pointed directly at everything Wilson had already been publicly processing for over a year. When the commissioner of the league steps into a conversation and uses the phrase political football, you know the situation has moved well beyond a basketball story. Adam Silver did exactly that just last week. Reporters pushed him on the ongoing noise surrounding Caitlyn Clark, specifically including a suspension report that had surfaced tied to one of her recent run-ins with officials, and Silver responded by saying Clark had become a political football, not a rising star dealing with growing pains, not a young player adjusting to veteran competition, a political football. Something that different groups pick up and use to fight battles that have very little to do with what's actually happening between the lines during a game. That choice of words from the commissioner of a professional sports league is not accidental. Silver understands exactly what he's saying when he says it. He's essentially acknowledging out loud that Clark now exists in a space that goes well beyond basketball, a space where everything she does on the court gets filtered through storylines, agendas, and conversations that were already happening before she ever got there. This isn't the first time Silver stepped directly into the Clark narrative either. Back in 2024, when Clark took a hard, flagrant foul from Kennedy Carter, Silver publicly addressed it and called it a welcome to the league moment. He was careful in how he framed it, acknowledging the foul without inflaming the surrounding conversation further. But the fact that the league's commissioner felt the need to personally comment on a single hard foul tells you plenty about the kind of attention Clark was already generating at that early stage. Silver has been walking that line for 2 full years now, protecting the financial and cultural growth Clark represents for the whole league, avoiding anything that could add unnecessary fuel to tensions that were already running hot enough without his help. It's a careful balancing act, and the political football comment suggests that balancing act is getting harder to maintain as the season progresses and the surrounding noise gets louder. The suspension report added another layer to an already packed All-Star weekend. Whether or not it materialized into anything concrete, the fact that it was circulating in the same news cycle as the captain decision and the reported players meeting created a picture that was genuinely difficult to look away from. Silver's words landed, and then the internet made sure everyone had an opinion about them by the following morning. What came next was exactly as divided as you'd expect. The moment the captain report hit the internet, the reaction split almost perfectly down the middle. And the interesting thing about both sides of that split is that neither one is entirely wrong, which is exactly what makes this whole situation so difficult to settle neatly. One side of the argument is making a point that's hard to dispute with straight numbers. Clark is the reason television ratings for the WNBA have reached levels the league hasn't seen in years. She's the reason certain arenas sell out weeks in advance. She's the reason merchandise tables at games have moved inventory at a pace that would have seemed completely unrealistic 3 seasons ago. When a coach is assembling an exhibition game designed to showcase the league's 30th season to the largest possible audience, putting the player responsible for that audience surge in the captain's role isn't a political statement. It's a practical decision with a clear purpose. The other side is making a point that also carries weight. Wilson wasn't causing problems. She wasn't staging a public protest or demanding attention in a disruptive way. By most accounts, the reported players' meeting was an attempt to address tension privately, internally, before it became a media circus. And Reeve's captain decision, whether intentionally or not, essentially guaranteed that the circus arrived anyway. Handing Clark that armband publicly, in the most visible all-star format the league has ever put together, made a quiet conversation impossible. Both of those readings are legitimate, and the tension between them is a big part of why this story refuses to stay contained to one news cycle and move on. What's also resurfacing now is a comment Wilson made back in 2024 that she dreaded playing in front of Indiana Fever crowds because of how overwhelming the attention around Clark had gotten. That comment circulated at the time and then faded from the main conversation. But connected to this week's captain report and the reported meeting request, it reads differently. It starts to look less like a single frustrated moment and more like part of a longer, ongoing pattern of discomfort that keeps resurfacing every time Clark hits another milestone that grabs headlines. And while Wilson has kept speaking on it publicly, Clark has kept doing something else entirely. Something that's starting to look like a very deliberate choice in how she's decided to handle all of this. Here's a simple fact worth sitting with for a moment. Through 2 full years of this ongoing saga, the flagrant foul, the referee controversies, the magazine interviews, the Time magazine piece, the suspension report, the captain drama, Caitlyn Clark has not posted a single public jab at anyone. She hasn't dropped a cryptic social media post. She hasn't called a press conference to address the surrounding noise. She hasn't said anything even remotely pointed about any specific person or situation surrounding her. She has, however, averaged historic numbers, night after night, in front of packed arenas, against defenses specifically designed to slow her down. That's the entire response, and it's a choice that tends to age very well over time. Wilson has said publicly on multiple occasions that she plans to keep doing her own thing regardless of what's happening with Clark's fan base or the spotlight constantly swirling around her. That's a reasonable position. Nobody should expect Wilson to stop being one of the best players in the league just because someone else is generating more headlines this particular season. Her 3 championships and 4 MVP awards aren't going anywhere, and no serious person is suggesting they should be. But here's the part that starts to create friction with Wilson's stated stance. If the plan is genuinely to tune it out and keep focusing on her own game, that message lands very differently when accompanied by a Time magazine sit-down, a reported team meeting request, a string of public comments about history and fairness, and a pattern of resurfacing in nearly every major Clark media cycle over the course of 18 months. Truly unbothered players exist in this league. They show up, they perform, they keep their focus narrow, and they let noise pass without touching it. Wilson is one of the most talented players this sport has ever produced. But the volume of explanations she's offered about why she isn't bothered by Clark's rise has quietly started to say something different from the words themselves. This isn't about diminishing what Wilson has built. It's about noticing a pattern that keeps repeating and recognizing that the contrast between the 2 players' approaches to this entire situation has become a story of its own, completely separate from anything happening on the court. And the court, as it always does eventually, is about to settle everything anyway. Chicago is right around the corner. So here we are, All-Star Weekend. Chicago, July 25th, the league's 30th season celebration, a milestone that was supposed to be about honoring the history of the sport and showcasing how far the WNBA has come since its very first season. Instead, it arrives carrying all of this. A'ja Wilson and Caitlyn Clark are on the same roster, same jersey, same bench, same game plan, and now, reportedly, the same captain decision hanging over everything before the first warm-up even starts. There are reports circulating that Wilson wants a word with Clark the moment she sees her at All-Star Weekend. Whether that turns into a genuine private conversation, behind closed doors, or another set of comments, dropped near courtside reporters with cameras rolling, is genuinely unclear at this point. What is clear is that sharing a locker room, a bench, and a captain designation for an entire weekend makes it basically impossible for either player to avoid the topic entirely, even if both of them genuinely wanted to, which is an open question on at least one side of that equation. Here's the part of this that carries real financial weight beyond the basketball storyline, though. Clark's arrival in this league didn't just generate headlines. It generated revenue at a level the WNBA had never experienced before in nearly 3 decades of existence. The league has operated at a financial loss for most of its history, subsidized by the NBA while building its audience year by year. Clark showing up and immediately generating the kind of viewership, ticket sales, and merchandise, numbers that professional leagues spend years trying to manufacture, didn't just benefit Indiana. It lifted the entire enterprise. Veterans across the league are now in a position to negotiate for significantly better contracts, partly because the financial picture of the entire league shifted when Clark arrived. That's not a small thing. That's the kind of change that takes years to build under normal circumstances, and it happened almost immediately. And that context matters when evaluating the frustration being expressed about attention, captaincy, and spotlight distribution. Because the player generating all of that attention is also the one whose presence made the financial environment that benefits everyone in that locker room possible in the first place. None of that resolves the tension, but it adds a dimension to it that tends to get left out of the conversation when the cameras are focused on the drama. Here's where everything lands when you pull back far enough to see the whole picture at once. A player in her second WNBA season just posted a stat line that this league has never seen in 30 years. She did it against a defense built specifically to stop her. She did it in under 30 minutes. And the response from some of the most decorated veterans in the sport's history wasn't admiration. It was a reported meeting, a captain controversy, and a commissioner using the phrase political football in a press conference. Basketball always settles its debates eventually. Not in interviews, not in magazine profiles, not in locker room meetings with reporters camped outside the door. On the court, in front of everyone, with nothing left to argue about except the box score. Clark is going to keep playing. The numbers are going to keep coming. And Chicago this weekend is either the moment some of these tensions finally get addressed honestly, or the moment they get pushed down again until the next milestone forces them back to the surface. Drop your prediction in the comments. Do you think this All-Star weekend fixes anything, or does it make everything worse? Because based on everything we just walked through, I already know where I stand. Thanks for watching Clark's Spotlight. If this one hit different, you already know what to do.